Beautiful.
Okay.
Thanks for coming on the show, buddy. This is the second time, right? You came on the show before
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
at the growers market, and you walked here, didn't you?
Jogged, yeah.
You jogged here, right on. You got your feet on the ground. Well, thanks for coming in, Aaron. Do you mind that I bill you as an advocate for the homeless? That's like a quick
I'm a homeless activist.
homeless activist. Cool, nice. Are you interested? Because since we have a spontaneous nature, we did not rehearse this show. We don't have a outline even. We're going to talk about what comes up.
Well, I gave a topic of importance.
Yes.
Domestic wolfing, I think, is the most important thing that we'd be talking about on a farm talk show.
Do you mind if we just would you be willing to talk about the history of your homeless activism for the homeless, just like a real quick thing of
Sure.
just so that, and if no one's ever heard about Aaron the homeless shepherd, if for them to get a clue as to what you've been up to in this town.
I came here 10 or 12 years ago as a homeless activist, voluntarily putting myself into a homeless lifestyle so that I would have the incentive and necessity to discover and invent all alternative, more practical ways for us all to exist once shit hits the fan. Can I say that?
Poop. You can say
Poop
poop.
hits the fan, okay. And when poop hits the fan, and because at that point, all of us will quite possibly be in a homeless situation if we're renting from our house, in a Bob-like situation is what a lot of people call it, bugging out. But once I came to Ashland, I got involved with a number of other projects to try to sustainabilize the future of this community. And one of the things I started concentrating on is food security. Once I recognized that producer pets, is what I'm calling them, are able to produce calories, which is the basis of food, far more efficiently than you're able to derive calories from gardening. And so I started being a part of a small group that met bi-monthly to reform the urban livestocking laws in Ashland. And that was like 5 years ago or something like that we got the laws changed so that you could have a plethora of menagerie of producer pets that produce eggs and milk and meat in your own backyard if you have a regular sized backyard. And once I recognized after a couple months of handing out flyers advertising Ashlanders' new rights, and was getting clear feedback that no one was really making any moves to expand upon their own food security ability, I actually started asking people if they would be interested in borrowing some of my chickens if I got some, or borrowing some of my goats if I got some. And I got a couple of yards that said yes, and they committed to a one month agreement, and I got some goats, got some chickens, started doing a goat share program, moving them around from yard to yard, and did a chicken share program.
Wow.
Moving them around from yard to yard. But it wasn't long before those 1 month commitments were broken by a couple people, to where I ended up having to actually live in my homeless situation, which is just behind buildings and vacant lots and whatnot around Ashland. I ended up having to camp with my goats more and more because the people were breaking the 1 month agreement, until at some point, I was like, you know what, I'll just, because I was sharing the milk with those people too. I was letting them borrow my goats, sharing the milking responsibilities, and we shared the milk. And
Yeah.
so
And it worked for a while. How long did it work for?
like a half a year.
Okay.
And then I started recognizing that I could do this on my own. If these people aren't going to be responsible enough as I am, and I'm a homeless situation, then I'll just keep the milk for myself. And I already got the routine down. I've been sleeping. After you do it for a couple of nights, you kind of get into a routine. You're like, well, then it's not any harder to just keep doing this.
That's a lot of logistics, dealing with all those homeowners and
Yeah.
like training them and
While
and
working
all.
on a bunch of other projects.
Yeah. Okay. So okay, cool. But that's
with
cool.
no
that
money.
you,
With
that's,
no money.
It's cool that you did that. Hey, just to jump back, I remember at one point
That's the background.
you were doing like some fundraising. You had like this clear plexiglass box.
Yep.
What was that about?
We still have that money. Ruth Coulter is holding on to it, and I've been asking adamantly on Facebook on what people would like to see us do with that money. and giving the example of what I think would be the most efficient way of utilizing the $5,000 that I raised 5 years ago now. I raised it for basically an inside-out start the world's first inside-out commune here in Ashland, Oregon, which would be a solution to homelessness. And basically, it was just to rent out a house that the most responsible homeless in town, in which case we were the managers of the project. And we got this LLC, by the way. This is not just like some poo-pooed and belittleable project that a couple of the Ashland homeless came up with. It was all of us working together through questionnaires to form this. It was called the Home Free Hostels Project, which got very, very little support from the social welfare industrial complex here in Ashland that actually stands to financially benefit from helping the homeless. They don't actually want to see any solutions come up from below them that are more efficient with utilizing less funds. And so they worked against it, and so it's, in a nutshell, it's not going to be possible to, unless people start helping me and advocating for this, it doesn't look like I by myself am going to be able to start renting a house and starting these what are called neighborhood help houses is another name that we had for them. In the very beginning, they were nothing more than houses that the responsible managers of the house would be homeless in the same way that a RA, a resident advisor, in a dorm is nothing more than a senior student. Well, a senior homeless local that is proven to be responsible is the manager of that room instead of that floor of a dorm. You know, like an RA is usually the manager of the entire floor of a dorm. In which case, we took that idea and said, well, the responsible homeless that are behind this project can manage a room each and can host up to 3 guests, other homeless guests. And in which case everyone would have to contribute an hour to helping out the community or someone in the community outside of the house each day. And the whole thing was funded by the transparent bank account, which we kept transparent the entire time, showing how much money was going out, that no money was coming out, how much money was going in, how much was coming out would be only for the rent of the house. So it's very basic idea that could not only help to repurpose and utilize the huge passions and abilities of the homeless community, but help out the people that are economically having more and more trouble paying for the labor that they need done. You know, this is like a pool of resources that needs to be tapped, and it's multi.
So you've got people who can't afford to fix their broken back door, and then you've got people that don't have a place to sleep that have carpenter's skills. So not only are you matching skills and needs, but I think the big picture is that this is a machine that helps to give stability, dignity. It's a healing machine, right? Like, it takes someone who's maybe on some level down and out and gives them a place to stay, a solid meal, and then connects them with their community so they're not an outcast. And maybe so you're healing bodies, you're healing hearts. That's
integrating, like we were talking about the other day.
Yeah.
It's all the other programs that the social welfare and industrial complex runs are patches on the homelessness problem, and because they don't attempt to integrate the homeless like they claim to want to do. They claim to want to integrate, but then they physically segregate the homeless off to the side into box shelters, into encampments on the edge of town, or into tiny villages on the edge of town, all of which are technically examples of segregation. So integration, an example of that would be to, it's actually has a coined term now, and it's actually proven to be far more efficient for long-term integrating homeless back into society. It's called dispersed site housing, I believe is what it's called. Model of homeless shelters. And so we had read about that, and we based our our project around that, and it being a work trade program, and it being more of a pay it forward work trade program instead of it being like a regular commune where you work trade at your own house, your own farm. This would be like a pay it forward program. We took all three of those elements and made them into one, but apparently it was overall the progressive spiritual heads here in Ashland, and they didn't pick up on it in the 5 years that we were working on it. But I still got the money, and I've still been working on ways the entire time of how I can most efficiently spend that money. And I think that these new wearable miniature teepees that I've come up with in the last year are going to be the ticket, and I'm looking to
Felted, they're wool.
Well, no, the felted ones were too heavy.
Okay.
They were nice, but they're too heavy. And I came up with a new pull mechanism.
Okay.
Basically, no one has ever taken the idea of a teepee and the idea of tent poles and has lashed the tops of those tent poles together so that they were all one unit, so that you could, so that the bundle can be pulled apart in its sections and folded over, and then be one little bundle. And then to assemble, you simply hold the lashings at the top of the bundle and let go of the rest of the bundle.
Yeah.
And
So it's kind of like
self-assembles instantly.
A backpacker's teepee.
It's awesome.
Kind of.
But I made it wearable too, so it's a poncho.
Dude, I love it. As far as with the poop hitting the fan, and if people are all on board with your vision, I could just see like just troops of people like with their shelters that's doubling as their jacket or their weather cover, and then you just like squat down, pop out the things, and like this little like shelter just forms over your body. I love that.
But the only problem is that it can become a bad thing if people's reactions aren't appropriate and appropriately timed, I guess you could say. Basically, if like these tiny shelters, wearable shelters, become more popular than this domestic woofing that I think we should touch on.
Yes.
Then it actually is going to give incentive for those homeless people that would be wearing that. They would give them more incentive to remain independent and to not integrate themselves. But if the community picks up on this idea of domestic woofing and starts to facilitate it in time, then these wearable shelters will actually work perfectly in unison with that domestic woofing program, because it would give all of these small farms that don't have the seasonal worker shelters to provide for a work trader to come onto their property. If we make this, in which case I've designed it to where it's replicatable, it's a DIY miniature poncho teepee. Anyone with $20 can go to the hardware store, pick up a $15 tarp, a $5 roll of Gorilla Tape, make this, and then start to contact the local farms that are around them that want work traders, but don't necessarily have like a yurt or a professional teepee and a porta potty and all this stuff. But the homeless people don't really need your what woofing programs call access to showers and certain other amenities. Homeless people aren't used to having that, and they don't necessarily require that if you don't require too much work from them, so to speak. These woofing programs are basically, if anyone doesn't know, are almost the perfect invention for humanity. And I said that earlier, and I'm not even joking. Like, this is almost the perfect invention for humanity. Woofing stands for Worldwide Workers on Organic Farms. Workers on Organic Farms is basically what that means. But the part that they're missing is that they're angling these websites toward the foreign rich tourists to connect with the rather richer farms. And the reason that it's promoting this, that all these websites are promoting this, woofing .com, there's helpx.com, and there's workaway.com, and there's a plethora of other ones, but those are the ones that are out in the lead, so to speak, of people's knowledge of them. And they all are geared towards selling memberships to rich farms and rich foreign tourists to connect the two with each other, so that they can travel to each other and work for each other.
And
But
you're saying this because the people that qualify have like space, like granny cottages or yurts,
Yeah,
and
like,
then they have bathroom facilities and stuff. But you're saying if somebody's just starting up a farm on a shoestring budget, they're not going to have facilities.
or the membership fee, it's $40 to $50 a year for these membership fees of these websites.
Yeah.
Just be a part of them, and no one's going to go out on a limb. If they're a part of a farm, they can spend $50 on, I don't know, a grain grinder to grind, their neighbor's grain or something like that, or maybe sign up for this woofing website and maybe have, like, it'd be a good experience. It's just too much of a toss-up. We need free domestic lists. We need lists of farms that are geared towards connecting the local, not only potential responsible homeless work traders, but the hordes of disgruntled regular workers that are working the regular jobs that are increasingly purposeless.
Yeah.
Just to earn your company owners more money.
Right.
People are so over this. They're looking for farms to work on,
Yeah.
and what do they trip upon? They trip upon woofing, and then they think that, okay, well, now all I have to do is save up $5,000 before I embark on this. No, what they need is to know of a website locally that connects them with their local small farms that they can immediately escape the shitstorm.
Yeah, gotcha. So, so I read this article in Permaculture Activist magazine a long time ago, and it was like in Illinois. They took these 3 counties and they did these really extensive studies to look at what it would take to grow all the food that the people in that area needed. And
Just grow, not raising meat or,
well, yeah,
or the
no,
milk.
no,
Milk production is the most efficient way.
No, all of it. Yeah, they were
Yeah.
doing meat, dairy, vegetables, fruit, the whole thing. But what the really cool thing they came up with, that is, in order to grow everything you need locally on small, sustainable, organic farms, there's a lot of labor involved, which is a problem for big business. The labor's a problem. But guess what? When there's a lot of people everywhere that want to have a job with dignity, it's not a problem, it's a blessing. So part of what they discovered with that study was that there would be tens of thousands of new jobs created as we move into this sustainable food security sort of economy. And so that's part of, ties in with what you're talking about, that there will be lots of rooms on farms for people to join in. And I hear what you're saying, like,
Preppers call it doubling up.
like walk away from your cubicle and trying to sell insurance to people in other countries or whatever, and just walk out into the garden.
Just go work for your local small farmer in exchange for being able to sleep in a tarp teepee or a tent, and then you don't need money to pay for your food because they're growing it there. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And Santa Cruz had this incredible homeless garden project that I got to go look at in the 90s.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But it was a community garden. It wasn't a living
Well,
situation.
Yeah, it wasn't a living. There was like a nice shed in the center of the garden, and there was like a simple kitchen, and they always had soup on, and they got free bread from the community, and they had butter, so you could have, and probably salad, so you could have like soup and salad and bread and butter, but it was always there, and it was beautiful farmland. It was like one of those mesas, the flat mesa right above the ocean there in Santa Cruz. And I've always thought that would be a great thing for this town. Instead of just busking or asking for money, you just go and work and get a meal. And then.
But no one's going to do that because there's literally any town that has tourism like this, you're not going to get homeless to work trade for food, for easy and healthy food.
It's too easy.
It's too easy to find the
out.
stuff that we're already addicted to that has the natural flavoring in it. You can't grow out of the damn ground.
Yeah.
No, honestly, like Ashland has no one is hurting for food in Ashland if they're homeless and they have 2 eyes and 2 hands.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
It's everywhere.
Hey, I want to step back to, you use the term producer pets.
Yes, as opposed to consumer pets, which
Okay.
are dogs and cats,
Okay.
because we no longer are hunter-gatherers full-time, so we have to feed our pets. They consume from us.
Right. Yeah. They cost. They give us love, but then they eat expensive dog food. So I see you. Okay. So you've been staying at the Billings farm, and that's where my old compost site is. So you and I have been crossing paths. I race up and down the road in my dump truck, burning petroleum. And I glance over, and I see you sitting under the oak tree with your sheep, and just like, you're kind of like in a meditative position. And I go racing off, and I come back an hour later, and there you are, still in meditation. Maybe.
I'm not meditating. I'm picking acorns.
Okay. Okay.
Picking up acorns. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And anyway, so we've had.
It is meditative. Though.
We've had that interaction for a long time, and I see you with your sheep, and I can see that it's a family. Like you love your sheep. They're your daily companions.
I'm concerned for them right now. They're concerned for me.
You guys are like really intimate, and that's something that we've been doing for a long time. Like workhorses, like these a team of horses is what made your living, and it's what took your family and your goods to town. And so this heart connection with the animals that give you food and the animals that do your work and carry you to where you need to go.
It shows the entire processes, which in industrial society we get nothing of. We are so compartmentalized, none of us even understand any process all the way through.
We push a button.
Nothing.
Push a button and coffee comes out. Push a button and you go down the street. Push a button and the cleaning service shows up.
So disconnected, yeah.
Push a button and it's you go to sleep.
Yeah, you see your animal though. You see the grass, the pasture that you have cultivated and helped and stress out optimally, or water, and then you see that being munched by your animals, and then that turned over, and then you turning that into cheese, and then you creating a meal out of that.
Yeah.
All from scratch is different. It's unlike anything that you can or feeding your sheep, watching them grow, watching their wool grow, shearing that and felting it into this vest.
Nice.
is a whole process that is severely lacking if you just buy your yarn and you are crocheting it.
Yeah.
That feels good, but go the whole distance.
Yeah,
and
we have a giant disconnect.
Be even better.
I mean, just taking your shoes off and standing on the earth next to an outdoor fire, you're getting there. Like you're moving in the right direction. And I want to point out that you make some really cool clothes. Your pants, your vest, you have a backpack. You make all this stuff out of your own wool, and I think it's like I was saying, you are walking your talk. You're not just a guy with philosophies. How can people share your website, Aaron?
That's what I was thinking. That it's all about trying to stay on focus, making progress with that rewilding or whatever you want to call it. It's 123 Home Free is the name of the website, 123homefree.org, or it's a YouTube channel that you can check out.
Nice.
Yeah, eventually all of us have to get to a place where we are maybe not self-sustaining, but community-sustaining. And I think that's obviously a lot smarter, a lot easier for us all to accomplish, is to enable our communities to be able to provide everything that we need, to empower our communities to provide everything that we need, instead of trying to provide everything ourselves, which is I've largely been like, my farm doesn't really grow vegetables, type thing, and so I've been trying to do a lot of the things myself, and it's not very easy, and it's not nearly as much fun. Woofing and parring up, doubling up is what preppers call it also. It is the notion that poop could hit the fan, and that the artificial economic system could cease to be able to deliver our food and our addictions tomorrow even. And at some point it will have to stop for at least a short moment in time and start back over, because it's all based on fiat currency. And fiat currency, F-I-A-T, if you look it up, it has to start over at some point, because it's based on exponential debt.
Yeah.
that at some point has to roll over.
Mm-hmm.
And we're getting there because the numbers are getting pretty freaking astronomical and ridiculous, and no one even
Mm-hmm.
understands them.
Yeah.
Like,
So I just not that what you're saying, I know what you're saying is important and it pertains to all of us, but I got to take one step back again. I'm just a backstepper and say that from my perspective on this show, I talk about farming all the time, and then I get all romantic and I get all glossy-eyed and I talk about hunter-gatherers being closer to the earth. Instead of trying to tame nature, they are one of the creatures in nature. And it feels to me that like the shepherd is a step between the farmer and the hunter-gatherer.
it depends on what type of shepherd. I totally agree. The original shepherds were a perfect, exactly. They came at the point in time in between our hunter-gatherer history and the newer inventions of agriculture.
Yeah.
Some places agriculture came before shepherding, and some places shepherding came right before agriculture. The point is that it was a huge step that we kind of quickly stepped off of. We stepped through, and we're not remembering that was actually a sweet spot, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have your hunter-gathering that required less work than the agriculture, but what's not reported on is that in between the cultures that had the shepherding before they had agriculture,
Mm-hmm.
they actually spent it was even more cush. It was they spent even less time working to acquire the things that they needed to survive, because they didn't need to hunt, because the herd was following them. See, that's the difference. Is like original shepherds, they were following around and following herds around, and they didn't have a connection with the herd, as in a trust with the herd, but they had a connection with them enough to follow them around and pick off the meat that they needed when they needed it.
Wild herds.
Yeah.
They're just migrating with the wild herds.
Yeah, and then those individuals and communities that followed the wild herds around eventually ended up feeding those herds and befriending them and picking them off in ways that didn't scare them away from them, and then they had to go follow them. That they would just pick them off and they'd stay around them, and then at that point, that was the most efficient way of subsisting. But then what you had agriculture come in, and agriculture it motivated people to build more steadfast houses, and to start separating them with thicker and thicker walls and more rooms away from their livestock. And fences, exactly. They started fencing in their livestock and physically and emotionally and mentally separating themselves from their livestock. And so then what it did is it ruined their relationship with their livestock, so that they started having to use dogs to not lead. They no longer could lead their sheep around, because their sheep wouldn't follow them, because they lost their connection with them, because they no longer lived with them, because the agriculturists had moved into houses. So they started having to use dogs to drive their herds with fear, because their animals no longer followed them out of love.
Gotcha.
So in between hunter-gatherers and agriculture, the communities that started doing shepherding before agriculture, that was a sweet spot. Any society that started went straight from hunter-gatherer to agriculture and then started trying to keep animals, that was like a shadow of the efficiencies of what the other.
So if you're
had.
a nomadic shepherd who lives with your flock, and it could be a village
you don't
of
even
people.
you don't even have to be nomadic. All you have to be is living with them. Like,
Well,
every time you leave them, they get in the routine
yeah.
of being all right with you not being with them, and so then they start the trend of grazing further and further away from you. And so basically every time that a shepherd that used to live 24/7 with his sheep, and his sheep followed him around with love because they trusted him and they were used to following around, every time that shepherd started to move towards agriculture and more steadfast and more walling off and more fencing off and stuff like that, they rather exponentially lost the connection with those livestock to the degree that it was necessary for their livestock to follow them around, and then they started needing to use dogs.
Okay.
And
Hey, let's take a quick break and then come back and talk some more about this. You're listening to Farm Talk Radio. This is Aaron. How would you like me to refer to you?
I don't care.
I got Aaron, advocate for the homeless in here, also known as Aaron the Homeless Shepherd, with a website which is 123homefree.org.
I'm more of a home free advocate than I am homeless free. Because I don't advocate for hopelessness or homelessness or to continue to live in the problems. I think that home free is getting past problems, and when we apply it to homelessness, that means to get past all the problems of homelessness, and that's what I'm advocating for.
Nice. When we come back, maybe we'll talk about your term home free and go into that. This is Farm Talk Radio. I'm your host, Dave Munson. Thanks again, Aaron, for coming in. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
It's been a really wonderful conversation. We've got another 6 minutes. And you were going to touch on the term home free.
Yeah, I think it's really important for the definition of home free to be established before it's ruined and diluted like all the other sacred words like eco and green and sustainability and all those things, spirituality. Home free.
Home.
Yeah, home free is historically been used. The definition is meant to mean that we have gotten past a certain problem. Well, when you apply it to homelessness, I think it's only appropriate that it mean that the person that you're claiming is home free has gotten past all the problems of homelessness. And with that definition, it actually becomes a very purposeful word. It gives you something to aspire to. It gives you a direction to move towards. Whereas if you just use it as a synonym for homelessness, it ruins that direction, that directionability for the homeless. And so homeless is a rather hopeless situation where you have many problems trying to just live. And so home free is the idea that it is possible for someone, in which case I don't know anyone who is home free. I don't know anyone who has gotten past all their problems for being able to at least subsist, being able to survive. Even off-gridders and whatnot are delusional about their being home free of all their problems because they actually have property tax and they're still dependent on replacing all their solar panels every 5 years or however long they last. My solar panel only lasts 2 years for it.
Yeah. So I just want to interject real quick that when you're talking about words being like worn out and misused, the word home itself, which is like central to our heart, to our being as humans or any animal, having a place where you can go, where you're safe, that you can call your own. And the word home in our society is directly connected to a 30-year mortgage. So it's basically slavery. So this one thing that pretty much all creatures need, which is a den, a place to go where you're okay, where the man won't chase you out. In this society, it comes with a 30-year sentence for slavery, so that you can pay 2 to 3 times the actual inflated price of your home, so that the bank can get extra rich on your blood, sweat, and tears. So the word home, unfortunately, has become this like a term. It's like
it's been tainted itself.
Yeah, it's almost like a fishing lure. It's like a sparkly lure to get your heart and get your hopes up. And then once you're hooked,
American dream.
It's like you're working for the man
the
for
American
30
dream.
years.
You have to be asleep to believe it.
Right. So affordable housing or taking a fresh look at private property and all that has to be part of it. But I'm going to let you continue. I just had to. No,
that's exactly. And I think we started touching on this the other day when you invited me back on the show. I was talking about how the official dumb is officially dumb. Almost everyone agrees with that notion that the notion itself of officialdom is now officially dumb. That we should officially want a white picket fence and we should want a bigger house and all that is officially being questioned now, because people are embarking on the opposite movement, which is the minimalist movement and the tiny home movement and the rewilding movement, and grounding yourself, and people are recognizing that the more dishes you have, the more dirty dishes you have, and the more clothes you have, just the more dirty clothes you have. It's not necessarily any advantage, and in fact it's a disadvantage. It takes away from your quality of living.
I woke up in a tiny house this morning and it feels so good.
Did you get yours done?
Well, done enough to live in.
Nice.
I'm working on it as I live in it. And my
Good.
2 kids come and stay with me, and they aren't quite happy with it because
They're
they
used
want
to it.
3 bedrooms, 2 baths, they want flushing toilet, they want all that stuff. But it's quite functional. It's got a loft upstairs that's its own private world. It's got a roof deck that's its own private world in the summer. And then it's got pop-outs, so it doesn't feel like a little 8-foot wide tunnel. It's actually got depth, and it is stylish.
It's not that it's lacking, it's just that they haven't gotten used to it. You actually get used to that, and then you feel uncomfortable moving into a larger area because you find that it's actually any larger than that size that you have.
Yeah.
You end up having to walk distances to get things and to do things, whereas like when they're a nice sweet spot of size, you're able to just take one step in any one direction and get anything accomplished instantly.
So Aaron, we've got like 30 seconds. How do we wrap this up? Aside from, I want to thank you for the work you do in your
integrity.
integrity.
Home free is the third side of the coin of possible existence. You no longer have to be homeless anymore, and you no longer have to be alternatively a cog in the shitstorm.
Or beholden to the bank.
You don't have to be a slave.
So it's somewhere
a
between.
Slave. You can be a farmhand.
Okay.
And start giving back to society, producing for society more than you actually consume, which is also the definition of home free that I gave you earlier. Is that homeless in general are defined as people who consume more than they produce for society, and the housed are generally assumed to be creating as much as they want to get back out of society, as much as money as they want to make and get out of society. Whereas home free now is the definition of producing more good for society than you are creating bad.
Cool, Aaron. Well, with that, we got to wrap it up. And thank you so much for coming in the studio.
123 Home Free. Google it.
.org. Thanks for tuning in, folks. This is Farm Talk. We'll be back next week. Have a beautiful celebration of Thanksgiving and abundance and harvest. And